Hi everyone, I recently purchased the Panasonic Lumix S5 and already last week Panasonic has released a new firmware update version 2.0 and I haven't updated my camera yet, so I thought I'd make a video and we could do that side by side, step by step. So let's get started. There seems to be a few ways to update the firmware on the camera, and I'm going to do it, I think, the easiest way, and that's via the SD card method. So what we have to do is on our computer, go to the Panasonic website, and I'll have links down below for that. Download the appropriate firmware, extract that onto the SD card, and then put the SD card into the camera, go to the firmware update menu, and then the camera does the rest from there. So let's get started. Alright, now this is the page that the links below take you to, the Lumix S series firmware update page. So we'll scroll down, and there's some information about the various S lineup cameras, and what's the latest firmware and what's included. And this kind of just tells you improved AF performance on all models, 5K for the S1R, cinema 4K recording, and raw video output for the S5. So all good stuff, right? And here it says DCS5 version 2.0. And then learn more about the firmware update by model. And then stuff down here is just extra information. But what we're interested in is this link right here. In my case, the S5. And then this is a more detailed description of what they've added in the firmware updates. So you can kind of read this at your own leisure. But essentially, yeah, we have some cinema 4K updates. We have some external raw recording. Couple of nice monochrome profiles we've added, and then some other minor bug fixes here. But let's click on this link here, firmware download. And on this page, what I'm looking for is my DC S5 version 2.0, released November 24, 2020. I'm going to click here. And then read through the license agreement, like so. And then just simply download this. And I've already downloaded it here. So let's click save and we'll replace it. And in my case, it's taking less than a minute to download. But let's go ahead and click on this next link here, the procedure for update. Now, on this page is saying that you need to make sure the camera body firmware is updated to the latest version, because sometimes you can't just skip firmwares, right? If there's a 1, then a 1.1, 1.2, you can't go from 1.0 to 2.0. Sometimes you have to install 1.1 or 1.2 first. In my case, you know, we only have version 1, and I can go directly to version 2 because there was nothing in between. And then the workflow description, check the current firmware, download the file, which we're doing, and extract the file, which we'll do next, and then copy the extracted firmware update program to the memory card, which we'll do. And then we'll follow the procedure in the camera body. Here's some other preparation steps. Fully charged battery, so because the updating may fail if the battery's not fully charged. And then the memory card, I'll be using an SD card, which is complying with the model that you're using, but importantly it says here, be sure to format the memory card with the camera that you are using. The memory card must have free space larger than the file size, which is always the case nowadays. Now right here it says how to display the firmware version, and there's some steps here, so let's go to the camera and take a look at that. Alright, let's turn the camera on, and then we'll go into the menu. And we're going to go down here to the wrench, and go all the way down here to another wrench, and then scroll down to the firmware version here. Click OK. And this is the firmware update menu. We'll come back to that later. And then software info, which tells us some other stuff. But most importantly, right here, we can see the body is on firmware version 1.0, and the attached lens is on version 1.0 as well, which is my 20 to 60. Alright, now just confirming that I do have a full charge on the battery. Let's go ahead and insert our memory card, because the instructions said we do need to format our memory card. So I'm going to go to here, the first line item, card format, click OK, and say yes. Now let's take the memory card out and go back to the computer. Now let's go to the downloads folder where I saved the firmware update from the Panasonic website. And you can see it saved it here. It's S5_V20. And this is a compressed file, so I need to double click on this. And I can see that inside the compressed file, we have the actual firmware update file. So I'm going to extract that file onto my SD card. So let's browse. And on this computer, like I said, it came up as drive G, so I'm going to click on that. And then I'm going to do select folder. I don't want to click on any of the folders inside drive G because I want to install or extract the firmware to the root folder of the SD card, which is just G/. I'll click extract and we'll wait for that to finish. And this is taking just about a minute also. And then one last look at the Panasonic website. It says here that copy the firmware file to the memory card. Do not copy more than 2 firmware files to the memory card because it might confuse the camera and you're going to mess it up. So just always install firmware onto a formatted memory card and only install one firmware file, the .bin file. All right, and then these are the other ways to install the firmware, but we don't need to worry about that. Let's click on Continue Procedure for Update. And then here are the instructions step by step of how to update the firmware. So let's just go into the camera and do that for ourselves. I'm going to take the memory card out of the laptop and put this into the camera. All right, so I have the camera off. I'm going to go ahead and insert the memory card into the top slot here. And let's go ahead and turn the camera on. Let's go into the menu. And we're going to go down to the bottom wrench here. And then go back to firmware version. And then we'll click firmware update. All right, so now it's saying firmware update the body to version 2.0, start the operation or start the update. And we'll go ahead and scroll over and say yes and click OK. And the website said it could take 3 to 5 minutes, but let's see. All right, that didn't take long at all. The camera seems to have restarted already, so let's go into the menu again and check the firmware version. You can see now that we're on body firmware version 2.0. All right, now let's check to see if we got the new Cinema 4K update. So I'm going to go into record quality, click OK. So I usually record regular 4K at 24p, but let's go up and see what's new here. There we go. Cinema 4K 24p 420, Cinema 4K 24p at 422 10-bit. Very good. And this is probably what I'll be using from now on. All right, and that seems to be all there is to updating the firmware on the Panasonic Lumix S5, and I'm sure it's identical on the other S-series cameras. Now, one last thing the website recommended was to format the memory card again to, delete or erase the firmware update files that are on that SD card before you go out and start shooting again, which makes sense. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, consider subscribing to the channel or buying me a coffee. But either way, hopefully we'll see you again soon.